Welcome to the Noah story, the story that is very real in life, the smile that hid 1,000 thorns. The morning Richard Horde brought his new life home, the entire neighborhood seemed to hold its breath. Vivienne stepped out of the black car wearing a cream colored dress and a smile so perfect. It looked painted on. She was beautiful, no one could deny that. Her dark hair caught the sunlight, her heels clicked with quick confidence on the stone path, and her eyes swept across the house the way a queen survey the house the way a queen surveys a newly conquered kingdom. Phoebe watched from the upstairs window. She was 17th, lean and quick, with her late mother's brown eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. She had promised herself she would be kind. She had practiced what to say the night before, whispering the words into her pillow. Welcome home, I hope we can be friends. I want Dad to be happy. She believed every word of it. Richard came through the door first, carrying two heavy suitcases and wearing the kind of smile Phoebe had not seen on his face in years. Since her mother passed that smile and gone into hiding, seeing it return made her chest achy with something complicated, something that was equal parts relief and grief. Phoebe, come down, he called. Come meet Vivienne. She came down the stairs slowly, her socks squeaked on the wooden steps. Vivienne stood in the hallway looking at the framed family photographs on the wall. Her eyes rested on one particular photo, a picture of Richard, Phoebe, and her mother at the beach, laughing at something long forgotten. Vivienne's smile did not change, but something behind her eyes shifted. You must be Phoebe, Vivienne said warmly, opening her arms. Your father talks about you constantly. I feel like I already know you. Phoebe stepped into the hug. Vivienne smelled like expensive perfume and something else underneath, something sharp and cold that Phoebe could not name. Welcome home, Phoebe said, and she meant it. The first 2 weeks are almost peaceful. Vivienne cooked elaborate dinners and complimented Phoebe's drawings that were pinned to the refrigerator. She laughed at Richard's old jokes and sat beside him on the couch with her head resting on his shoulder. She bought fresh flowers every Sunday and placed them in a vase on the kitchen table. But small things began to surface, the way bubbles rise before water boils. When Richard left for work, the warmth drained from Vivienne's face like water from a bathtub. She would sit at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone, ignoring Phoebe entirely. If Phoebe said good morning, Vivienne would respond without looking up. If Phoebe reached for something in the refrigerator, Vivienne would sign as if the sound of the door opening was unbearable. One afternoon, Phoebe accidentally knocked over a decorative vase while cleaning the living room. It did not break, it simply toppled and rolled beneath the side table. But Vivienne appeared in the doorway instantly, as if she had been waiting for exactly this kind of moment. That belonged to my grandmother, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. It did not break. Phoebe said carefully, I'm really sorry, I did not mean to. You never mean to, do you? Vivienne replied and walked away. That evening at dinner, Vivienne laughed and touched Richard's hand and told a funny story about something that happened at the salon. Phoebe sat quietly and ate her food and said nothing about the waste of the tone or the cold silence that had filled the kitchen all afternoon. The letter arrived on Thursday. Phoebe came home from school to find it sitting on the kitchen counter, already opened. Her stomach dropped the moment she saw the torn envelope. It was addressed to her. She picked it up with trembling hands and read the words inside. Congratulations, you have been awarded a partial scholarship to Hartwell University. It was her top school. She had applied in secret, half convinced she would never get in. Her grades were excellent, but the competition was fierce, and Hartwell was the kind of school her mother had always dreamed of for her. She pressed the letter to her chest and closed her eyes. When Richard came home, Phoebe ran to him before he even took off his coat. She handed him the letter with both hands, watching his face as he read it. His eyes went wide and then soft and then bright with the particular light of a parent who is overwhelmed with pride. Phoebe, he breathed. He pulled her into a hug so tight it lifted her off the ground. From the kitchen doorway, Vivienne watched them both. Her expression was unreadable. Her fingers curled slowly around the edge of the doorframe. That night, long after the lights went out, Phoebe lay in the bed and stared at the ceiling. She felt happy and afraid at the same time. The way you feel standing at the edge of something enormous, not yet knowing whether it is a beginning or a trap. She did not know that it was both. The cruelty behind closed doors. 3 days passed after the scholarship letter arrived, and the house felt different. Phoebe could not explain it precisely. The furniture had not moved, the floors were still fresh in their ways. Richard still kissed Vivienne on the cheek before leaving for work every morning, but something beneath the surface of the daily life had shifted. The way ice shifts under pressure before it cracks, Vivienne had stopped pretending. Not completely, not where Richard could see. In front of him, she was still warm and gracious, still the devoted wife who asked about his meetings and refilled his coffee without being asked. But the moment his car disappeared down the street each morning, the temperature inside the house dropped several degrees. Phoebe had developed a habit of leaving early for school. She would eat a quick breakfast, standing at the counter, pack her bag the night before, and slip out the front door before Vivienne came downstairs. It was not a solution, it was a survival. So one morning, she was not fast enough. She was still at the kitchen table with her bowl of cereal when Vivienne appeared in her silk robe, hair perfectly arranged. Eyes sharp and clear, Vivienne poured herself a coffee and leaned against the counter, studying Phoebe the way a cat studies something it had already decided to toy with. You seem very excited about this university idea, Vivienne said pleasantly. Phoebe looked up. I worked hard for it. Of course you did. Vivienne smiled and sipped her coffee. It is just that your father works very hard for his money, and a partial scholarship still leaves a great deal of tuition uncovered. Has he told you how much it actually costs per year? He talked about it. We talked about it. Phoebe said carefully. He said he wants to make it work. Vivienne titled her head. He is too generous for his own good. That is his weakness. You know, he gives and gives until there is nothing left for the people who are truly in his life. She paused, letting the words settle. I just worry about him. Phoebe set down her spoon. He is my father. Paying for my education is not something he has to be protected from. Vivienne's smile did not waver, but her eyes went flat. I am only thinking of our future together. Richard and I have plans, a home we want to build, a life we deserve. It is difficult when old obligations keep pulling at a person. Old obligations? Phoebe picked up her bag and left without finishing her breakfast. At school, she told her best friend Camille everything, sitting on a bench behind the gymnasium where they always went to when something serious needed to be said. Camille listened without interrupting, which was one of the things Phoebe loved most about her. She called you an old obligation, Camille said quickly when Phoebe finished. She did not say it directly, she never says anything directly. That is worse, Camille said. The ones who stab you with a smile are always worse. She thought for a moment, does your dad know any of this? He sees what she wants him to see. Camille looked at her carefully. Then someone needs to help him see the rest. That weekend, Richard's business partner, Owen's Grant, came for dinner. Owen was a big, straightforward man who laughed easily and spoke his mind without decoration. He had known Richard for 15 years and had watched Phoebe grow up from a gap-toothed child who did under his coat at company parties to the serious, thoughtful young woman she had become. Vivienne was magnificent at dinner. She served the meal beautifully, laughed at Ove's stories, and spoke about Phoebe's scholarship with what sounded like genuine pride. She touched Richard's arm and called him darling and made sure everyone's glass was filled. Owen watched her with the quick attention of someone who had spent years reading people across negotiating tables. After dinner, while Vivienne cleared the plates and Richard took a phone call, Owen sat beside Phoebe on the back porch steps. How are things? He asked simply. Phoebe looked at the dark garden. Fine. You are a terrible liar, Owen said kindly. Always were. She almost smiled, then she told him not everything, but enough. The coldness, the comment about old obligations, the way Vivienne watched her with those flat, calculating eyes whenever Richard was not in the room. Owen was quiet for a long moment. Does she know you? No. Not what? That she is performing. Phoebe thought about it. Yes, I think she does. I think that is part of it. Owen nodded slowly. He did not offer easy reassurances. He just sat beside her in the pitch dark and let her know without words that she was not imagining things and she was not alone. Inside the house, something else was happening. While Richard was still on his call, Vivienne stood in the hallway outside the kitchen, speaking softly into her own phone. Her voice was careful and low. Phoebe, coming in through the back door for a glass of water, stopped when she heard her name. The girl is problem. Stella, Vivienne was saying. She was his whole heart and she knows it. As long as she is here, I will never have full access to what is mine. A pause. No, she does not suspect anything yet. Richard is blind. When it comes to her, it is almost touching how blind he is. Another pause, and then a small cold laugh. The university will take her far away. Once she is going, things will be much simpler. I just need to make sure the money situation becomes complicated enough that Richard starts to feel the pressure. Phoebe stood completely still in the dark hallway. Her heart was beating so loudly, she was certain it could be heard. She pressed herself against the wall and breathed slowly and listened to every single word until Vivienne's footsteps moved toward the living room and the voice faded. Then she stood alone in the hallway for a long time, the glass of water forgotten, her hands very steady, her mind absolutely clear. She knew now, and knowing changed everything. The truth walks into the light. Phoebe did not sleep that night. She lay in her bed with the ceiling above her and the words from the hallway turning slowly in her mind like stones in the dark water. She replayed every syllable. She replayed every syllable, every pause, every quick laugh. She thought about the ways that had not broken. She thought about the ways that had not broken. She thought about the words, old obligations spoken with a smile. She thought about her father's face when he read the scholarship letter, that wide open, unguarded joy, and she felt a fierce and quick determination rise inside her chest. She was not going to cry about this, she was going to think. By morning, she had a plan. It was not dramatic or complicated. It did not involve shouting. It did not involve shouting or It did not involve shouting or accusations or kitchen table confrontations. It did not involve shouting or accusation or kitchen table confrontations. It was simply this: she would let the truth speak for itself, and she would make sure her father was in the room to hear it. She called Owen Grant before school. He picked up the second ring. "I need your help," she said, "not to fight, just to make sure my father hears something he needs to hear." Owen was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "Tell me what you need." Phoebe excited. Owen listened. When she finished, he said only, "Saturday evening, I will make sure Richard is there." The week that followed was the longest of Phoebe's life. She moved through the house carefully, keeping her expressions neutral and her voice pleasant. She helped with dinner twice without being asked. She complimented Vivienne's new bracelet and asked politely about her plans for redecorating the sitting room. Vivienne received all of it with visible satisfaction, her posture relaxing slightly, her smile becoming more genuine in its smugness. She thought she had won. Camille came over a Wednesday afternoon and sat on Phoebe's bed while Phoebe packed a small bag of things she wanted to keep safe at Camille's house. Just in case Camille did not ask questions, she simply held the bag open and zipped it closed when it was full and said, "Whatever happens, you are not alone in this." Phoebe hugged her and did not let go for a moment longer than usual. Saturday arrived, grey and cool, with these clouds stretched across the sky like torn paper. Owen called Richard in the afternoon and invited him over to discuss a business matter that needed attention before Monday. Richard told Vivienne he would be back by evening. Vivienne smiled and said, of course, she had her own errands to run. But she did not run errands. Phoebe watched from the upstairs window as Vivienne's car pulled out of the driveway and then 20 minutes later pulled back in. Vivienne came inside quickly, moving through the house with the ease of someone who believed she was completely alone. She went to their study, Richard's private study, and Phoebe heard the soft sound of dryers opening. Phoebe came downstairs slowly and stood in the hallway outside the study door. Through the gap, she could see Vivienne sitting at Richard's desk, going through a folder of financial documents. She had her phone out and was photographing pages, her movements quick and practiced. The movements of someone who had done this kind of thing before. Then Phoebe heard another sound, the front door. Richard and Owen came in together, their voices carrying the easy rhythm of two people mid-conversations. Phoebe stepped back from the study doorway and into the living room, her heart hammering but her face calm. She looked at Owen, he looked at her. He understood immediately. "Richard," Owen said quickly, placing a hand on his friend's arm. "Before we sit down, I think you should check your study." Richard frowned. "What for?" "Just go look." Richard walked down the hallway. Phoebe followed a few steps behind. Owen stood at the hallway entrance, saying nothing, his expression grave and still. Richard pushed open the study door. Vivienne looked up from the desk. For 1 full second, nobody moved. The room held its breath. Vivienne's eyes moved from Richard to Owen to Phoebe and back to Richard, and in that moment, Phoebe watched the performance collapse. The warmth drained away, the careful constructed softness fell from Vivienne's face like a custom drop to the floor, and what remained underneath was something harder and colder and entirely unfamiliar. "Richard," Vivienne began, her voice reaching for the right tone. "I was just looking for the insurance documents we discussed. You remember you said I could." "I never said that," Richard said. His voice was very quiet. You must have forgotten, darling. You have been so busy lately. Richard walked to the desk and looked at the open folder. He looked at the phone in her hand. He looked at his wife for a long moment with the expression of a man who is doing mathematics in his head, adding up small sums that have been accumulating for a long time without his knowledge, arriving at a total that changes everything. Vivienne, he said, push the phone down. She put it down, stepped away from the desk. She stood up slowly, smoothing her jacket, resembling her composer with visible effort. You're overreacting. This is the misunderstanding, and if you would simply let me explain. Phoebe, Richard said, without turning around. Phoebe stepped into the doorway. Yes, Dad. Last week was there something you needed to tell me? She had not expected him to ask so directly. She had expected to need to find the moment to carefully introduce that what she had heard to manage his reaction, but Richard Holt had always been more perceptive than he appeared, and looking at him now she understood that he had already begun to see on his own. She had not needed to arrange this moment. The truth had simply been waiting for enough light. She told him what she heard in the hallway, every word. She spoke clearly and without embellishment, the way her mother had taught her to speak when something important needed to be said. She did not look at Vivienne while they spoke. She did not look at Vivienne while she spoke. She looked only at her father. When she finished, the room was very quiet. Vivienne opened her mouth. Richard raised one hand, just slightly, just enough, and she closed it again. He crossed the room and stood in the front of his daughter and put both hands on her face, the way he used to when she was small and had fallen and he needed her to know she was going to be perfectly fine. I'm sorry, he said. I should have seen this sooner. You are happy. Phoebe said, I wanted you to be happy. Something moved across his face that was too large and too tender for anywhere to hold. Owen stepped quickly. Out of the hallway and closed the front door behind him, giving them the privacy that the moment required. Vivienne gathered her bag and her phone and her composure and walked out of the study without another word. Her heels clicked down the hallway, across the entrance, and out through the front door. The sound faded. The house went still. Richard made 2 cups of the tea and brought them to the kitchen table and sat across from his daughter in the ordinary Saturday evening light. Richard made 2 cups of tea and brought them to the kitchen table and sat across from his daughter in the ordinary Saturday evening light. They talked for a long time about her mother, about the scholarship, about Hartwell University and what she wanted to study and what her mother had always dreamed for her, about how the house would be quieter now and how quiet was not always the same as empty, about how love, real love, did not calculate a photograph, document, or call someone an old obligation, about how the most valuable thing in Richard Hort's life had been sitting across from him at kitchen tables for 17 years, and he was grateful, deeply and completely grateful, that he had not lost her. Phoebe wrapped both hands around her warm cup and looked at her father. I love you, Dad. I love you too, he said. More than anything in this world. Outside the thin clouds and cleared and the evening lights came through the kitchen window in long golden lines, falling across the table, across the tea, across the faces of the father and daughter who had found their way back to each other through the shadow of a woman who had never understood what she was standing in the middle of. Not a conquest, not a fortune, not an obstacle, a family. And families, the real kind, built from love and loyalty and years of the ordinary moments shared across kitchen tables, do not break so easily. They bend, they hold, they remain. So in this story we learned many things like a family. We did not need to interrupt any relation in selfishness. We should obey the rules, and we should obey the relations of father and the daughter, and we should obey the rules of the family members. That's all. We should need to learn things from the stories, and we should need to make our stories so precious like this kind of stories. Thank you.